Hello, my friends. It's Monday, April 7th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee, and welcome to the Radical Russ Show, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in my undisclosed mountain hideaway in the beautiful state of Jefferson region of Southern Oregon. Well, good morning and welcome to Orange Monday. Orange is the new black as the stock market opens 1,200 points lower, flirting with its 52-week low. That's right. Trump's tariffs in 3 trading days have wiped out an entire year's worth of stock gains. Checking in live here at 6:55 Pacific time, the Dow Jones is down 1158. Trading at about 37,000 points, may fall below 37,000 by the time I finish recording this podcast. Are we tired of winning yet? We'll be talking all about Orange Monday and what's going on with that in our first segment. Also coming up on the program, a look at the hands-off protests from Saturday. I went out to Medford, Oregon's protest. I'll give you some audio from there and from some other places out here in the West. What an amazing success this weekend was. Then we take a look at what's happening with the current DEI purge. Remember, it's the shortest way for MAGA to spell the N-word. And the latest purge has to do with the National Park Service and their whitewashing of the Underground Railroad. It's pretty shocking. We'll tell you all about it. We take a look at our concentration camp down there in El Salvador, and CNN did some investigation on the criminal records of these terrible, terrible Tren de Aragua gangsters and found out 3/4 of them don't even have criminal records, much less any membership in a gang. Then, speaking of more panics, we've got the trans panic still going on, and Tommy Tuberville, the dumbest member of the United States Congress, and that says something when there's so many of them to choose from. Tommy Tuberville thinks that everybody's turning trans, so we got to give you some reality check on that. Also, we've got our regular Boycott Idaho segment, a shocking story coming out of the state's prison system where they're doing roadside drug deals to try to get death penalty drugs. Then we will take time for my radical rant where we ask the question, how or should we welcome the pissed off MAGAs who are losing their 401ks? How should we welcome them into the resistance, or should we welcome them in at all? All that's coming up on the Radical Russ Show. But before we get to that, as you know, I am a hobbyist podcaster. I do this for fun. So if you'd like to spread this podcast to others, please do so, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on marketing. And, I don't do any advertising either. And I hope you like that. I really don't like shilling for things, but the fact is, I don't mind shilling for things. I like making money like anybody else does. I just don't like all the hassle of booking and contracting and calling and getting the invoices and finding. It's just a pain in the ass to me. So my offer still stands. If you know someone that would like to advertise on the Radical Russ podcast and you want to handle it, I'll split it with you, half and half. Let's do this thing. So anyway, I'm a podcaster by hobby, which means that I need to make myself useful to capitalism in some way, and I do so by doing the gig apps. And while I was driving the other day, as a beautiful, beautiful day out, and I got a call to one of the many wineries that are out here in Southern Oregon. Southern Oregon puts out some fantastic wines. And I got to the pickup, and it's 3 beautiful young ladies who are out there for day drinking and having some fun. They get into the car, and I tell them that I've got the full satellite package for the radio, and what would you like to hear? And the young lady said, oh, I'd like to hear some old country. And I said, okay, old country. What's old to you? And they all like 80s and 90s. I sighed and looked down at the Willie Nelson t-shirt I was wearing and flipped it to prime country. So yeah, I am old. I guess the stuff that I grew up with is now oldies music. Happens to the best of us. Orange Monday is fully in effect here. We are seeing the stock market rebound a little bit here during our first segment, down at this point only 1,000 points. So a little bit of a rebound, but we don't know how long that will last. And it's pretty amazing that this is happening. We kind of knew this was going to happen. I think there was somebody that warned us that something like this could occur.
The fact that Donald Trump's plans for the economy would accelerate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
Increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. Increase inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
A recession by the middle of next year.
To a recession by the middle of next year. Recession by the middle of next year. Recession by the middle of next year. A recession by the middle of next year. A recession by the middle of next year. A recession by the middle of next year. Recession by the middle of next year.
Golly, that lady sounds pretty smart. Well, we should have elected her president, I guess. Yeah, of course. That's Kamala Harris in numerous appearances, numerous speeches, explaining how Donald Trump was going to wreck the economy. And sure enough, here it is, April 7th, and the middle of next year when she was speaking would be sometime around June of this year, wouldn't it? So looks like the predictions are coming true, but gosh, we just couldn't have her be president because, you know, a trans girl might play volleyball for Boise State and, you know, there'd be a problem there. Or you know, there might be black people flying planes. You know, we might allow black people to fly planes, so we can't have that. Are you serious? This is such a reckoning for the United States of America to recognize the huge mistake that we have made. Remember, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And electing Donald Trump the second time, that's shame on all of us. And I don't know if the world is ever going to be able to forgive us. Remember, our stock market tanking is tanking the rest of them too. On yesterday's trading for the Asian markets out in Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, all of their markets went through circuit breakers. Now, if you don't know a lot about stock trading, which I don't, I got to say, when I'm reporting on this stock stuff, I'm poor. I'm super poor, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I read, and so what I understand here is that these three markets out there in Russell Futures, I guess another one, all these Asian markets tripped their circuit breakers, which is when the trading is going so badly, when the markets are crashing so fast, they just stop. Like, all right, enough of this shit. Stop trading, you assholes. We're done. We're done for the day. And there's such circuit breakers in American stock markets, too. And it's just a question. I'm reading some of the financial pages ask. They're wondering, you know, are we going to hit a circuit breaker today? Is it going to get so bad that we hit a circuit breaker? And it's just stunning here, too, because a lot of the MAGA out there, I'm reading a lot of their responses. You know, I didn't vote for this. You're taking my 401k. This isn't what we voted for. Yeah, this is what you voted for. This is what this guy said repeatedly he would do. He talked about tariffs all the time. It was written out in this big 900-page manual called Project 2025. Maybe y'all should have looked into it. No, you got exactly what you voted for. And now it's only beginning to affect you. And so now you've got some problems with it. So coming up at the end of the program, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, about whether or not these MAGA folks who, now that it's affected them personally, deserve any of our sympathy. But let's take a look out at the Congress, too, because remember, tariffs are the purview of Congress. Our Constitution lays out the power of the purse, and that includes taxation and tariffs with the Congress. It's been over a series of years that the Congress has given up that power, has shifted that power over to the executive branch through a series of emergency acts and declarations that allow the president the latitude to quickly establish tariffs. Congress gave that power. Congress can take it away. This could end any moment if the Republican Party began to realize that they are killing their own electoral chances. At this point, they are still more afraid of Elon Musk funding some primary Republican against them than they are of the people out there that would be voting in those primaries. And judging from the crowds that I saw out at the hands-off protests this weekend, I think there's a whole lot of those Republican primary voters who will not be interested in supporting anyone who is supporting Donald Trump and his terror tariffs. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is counseling the Republicans in the House to hold the line on these tariffs. Don't give up. Don't get weak. Don't be upset just because thousands and thousands of people are calling your offices and filling your voicemail boxes. Don't be upset that they're coming to your town halls and screaming you down about the attacks on Social Security and Medicaid. Don't worry about these tariffs. Hold the line, says Mike Johnson. We just need to trust President Trump, because President Trump before delivered us the greatest economy in American history, and he'll do it again. Do these MAGA actually believe that? Like I was writing the other day, it's a good thing that Mike Johnson can be trusted to give accurate and compelling statistics about the American economy, because Donald Trump did not deliver us the greatest economy of all time. Not even close. Over the past few Democratic presidents, Clinton, Obama, Biden, versus the past few Republican presidents, Bush, Trump, and Bush-Reagan before that, the job growth numbers alone, 50 million jobs created under the Democratic administrations, 1 million created under the Republican administrations. 1 million total over all of them in this century. 1 million jobs going back to Reagan even. These guys wreck the economy every time they get in, because it's all about carving out the deals for their fat cat buddies. They don't understand the idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. Or if you want to get money circulating in an economy, you give it to poor people who spend it, not rich people who hoard it. So hold the line, he says. Stand tall, stand strong. It's like the Persians in 300. Hold the line. All right, what am I thinking of? Maybe I'm thinking of what's that Mel Gibson movie? Braveheart. Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of Braveheart. Hold the line. You're gonna get slaughtered. And if we can't take back the House of Representatives in 2026 after all of this, then just put a fork in the Democratic Party. They are absolutely done. And the other thing I'm hearing from some of these people watching on the financial channels, and they're giving the advice of, well, there's got to be some short-term pain for long-term gain. Why, this economy's been propped up on all of this these trade deals for so long, and we've been ripped off for so long that we just have to endure some short-term pain. Oh, you're going to take a little bit of a hit to your 401k, and things might be bad for a little while, and there could be some inflation and a recession, but we just got to take some short-term pain for some long-term gain. Never mind that you're 65 and we're looking to retire, and long-term gain might not see you alive at the end of it. Never mind that. We've got to have some long-term gain here, so you've got to put up with the short-term pain. Now, understand, these are the same goddamn people that wouldn't put on a mask to protect your grandma from COVID. A mask? How dare you ask me to cover my face in public? Why? What is this, communist China? Yeah, short-term pain, long-term gain. Here's hoping for the maximum amount of short-term pain for you and your non-mask wearing friends. That was the sound from the median of Jackson Street in Medford, Oregon, where I was standing filming the thousands of people who turned out for the hands-off protests there in Jackson County. And it was really amazing when I got there. You know, I put my sign together and expected to, you know, be standing in kind of a plaza, maybe with a few dozen, maybe 100, a couple hundred people, to show up there and see the entire road just packed with people on the sidewalk, 10 deep for 3 blocks long on both sides of the road, and the center median was just incredible. I couldn't believe it, and it was just amazing. All the great signs and effigies. If you want to see some of my pictures from this, you can find them out on my Blue Sky page at radicalruss.com on Blue Sky, or go to my website, radicalruss.com. I put a post out there as well. And this was similar turnout all across the nation. The reports from the organizers, indivisible.org, tallied up 5.2 million people that had turned out all around the United States for these protests. If you saw the video from New York City, it was pretty amazing too. Hundreds of thousands turned out in New York City. And one of the turnouts I really appreciated was to see them coming from the red states. In particular, here's some audio from the folks in Salt Lake City, Utah, of all places. Yeah, when you've got Utahns in public shouting, "Fuck Donald Trump," you know that something is happening out there. This is so amazing. And the other thing that was amazing about these protests to me was no cops. Like, no cops. Like, when I showed up to the one in Medford, I was, expecting cops. Once I saw the size of the crowd, right? Once I saw the massive amounts of people out there, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to have a car at the intersection with the lights on. They're going to have cops at the intersection to control the flow of pedestrians across the street and the cars trying to get in. Because Jackson Street there is kind of also a commercial area, like kind of a strip mall and a movie theater area on one side, and a park on the other. So there's still people trying to go about their daily business. There's got to be some cops out here managing it all. Not one. Like, the whole time I was there, 2 hours that I was there for the whole protest, I saw one cop car drive through the protest, taking a look, but no boots on the ground. Not a single cop to be seen. And we got a similar report coming out of New York City, where they said the same thing. They were like, the cops said, we only have 44 cops down here in New York to take care of this protest because we really didn't expect that it would turn out this large. The police were stunned by this. They couldn't believe it. It wasn't a matter of not wanting to patrol it. It's that they didn't think they would have to. And the other thing to note about that, with no cops at these protests, nobody stormed the Capitol. Nobody swung a flagpole at a cop. Nobody bear-maced anybody. There were no fights. There were no riots. There were no problems whatsoever. The closest thing that we had to a problem at the protest in Medford was the appearance of the anti-abortion protesters. You know the ones. They bring their big old signs with the dismembered, bloody fetuses. The pro-life, pro-life. And they brought their big old signs around and started trying to do their little chants. And the beautiful thing about that was to see the phalanx of pro-trans protesters who immediately surrounded them. Maybe they're not all pro-trans, but, just there were some trans protesters there as well. But anyway, they all surround the pro-abortion people and hold their signs up high so that you can't see any of their signs. And, well, let me just give you some audio from this. Hold on.
So, as is typical at some of these protests, you end up getting the anti-abortion people showing up, and they're trying to show their signs here, but Trans Lives Matter protesters are in the way, holding their signs up in front of the signs that the anti-abortion people are showing up. And I always thought it was strange when they would bring that sign out that has the fetus that's all dismembered, because in their mind, they think that's a child, and that child is naked and dead. So doesn't that make it child snuff porn?
Yeah, I've always wondered that about those people, how sick they are and depraved to be showing pornography and snuff pornography, or child sexual abuse material, we should say, out in the streets. But it just goes to show how bankrupt their ideology is in the first place, worshiping the fetus ahead of the woman. So a lot of fun was had at these protests, and the next protest is coming up on April 19th. After 2 weeks of Trump's tariff palooza, I'm sure we will pack the streets even fuller. All right, checking back in on the stock market on this Orange Monday, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. And what's this? We're in the green. The stock market is up 535 points. This market manipulation, a lot of people are talking about how Trump is just doing this to tank the markets, and then all of his billionaire oligarch buddies can swoop in at fire sale prices and buy all this stuff up. Maybe that's what we're seeing here, a little of that recovery. Well, all right, we'll keep an eye on that. In the meantime, I wanted to tell you this story coming out of the Washington Post, quite disgusting story having to do with the National Park Service. As you know, Trump and his minions are trying to whitewash American history. They want to make sure that no white person ever feels guilty about the terrible atrocities that were perpetrated in order to form this country. And the focus today is on the Underground Railroad. Now, as you know, the Underground Railroad was the famous series of stops for enslaved people trying to escape the South. They would be hidden out in abolitionists' basements and going through tunnels and all sorts of hardships to make their way to escape to the northern states or farther up into Canada. And of course, the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad, General Harriet Tubman. You did know that she's been given a posthumous general rank. Anyway, Harriet Tubman led the Underground Railroad, the resistance to enslavement, and the escape and the fight of the Civil War. So, the National Park Service has a website, a web page to introduce the Underground Railroad. And for years on that site, it would explain how it was referring to the efforts of enslaved African Americans to gain their freedom by escaping bondage. Well, now, on the website, they've taken down the picture of Harriet Tubman, and they've put in its place images of Postal Service stamps that highlight black-white cooperation in the secret network, and that feature Tubman among abolitionists of both races. See, we're all just getting along then. The white folks and the black folks helping each other out. That's what the Underground Railroad was all about, you see. They also took out the introductory sentence, the part about the efforts of enslaved African Americans gaining their freedom by escaping bondage. No more. It has been replaced by a line that makes no mention of slavery and describes the Underground Railroad as one of the most significant expressions of the American civil rights movement. The effort bridged the divides of race, the page now says. A clear whitewashing of literally what the Underground Railroad was all about. I mean, how do you talk about the Underground Railroad without talking about slavery or the Civil War or the efforts of white folks to capture their escaped slaves? Let me give it a try. The Underground Railroad bridged the divides of race by connecting some people who sought better working conditions with other people who'd help them find their way to places where they wanted to relocate for personal reasons, wholly unconnected with any broader social and political movements. How far is this going to go? The Trail of Tears was a nice hiking trail that was provided for the Native Americans to relocate from the humid and terrible weather and climate of Florida to the beautiful destination of dusty Oklahoma. The internment of Japanese Americans was a free bed and breakfast program for people of Asian descent. How far is this going to go? You see this with the MAGAs. You see this with the right, where they pass laws in the schools. We can't teach anything divisive. We don't want to make white kids feel bad that their ancestors enslaved people and committed genocide. We don't want to make the white kids feel bad. Balderdash. We need to fully embrace everything that made this country, good and bad. We need to understand where we came from. We need to understand the horrors we perpetrated, and we need to have some truth and reconciliation about it, maybe some reparations as well. And these people, they come, oh, we all want to live in the past and rehash the hurt, and you're trying to take advantage of white guilt. We should feel guilty. My God, the stuff that our ancestors did. My surname, Belleville, sits atop the entrances to 2 plantations. There's one in South Carolina. There's one in North Carolina, the Belleville plantations. In my name, people were held in bondage, enslaved, worked to death, their families sold out from under them, their women, their children, their men raped, forced to fight each other for the pleasure of the slave owners, whipped, mistreated. For centuries we did this. And there's no need for any living white person to take current guilt over that. I don't feel current guilt over that. I feel historical guilt over that. I feel like I want to be a part of making this country better for everyone. I want to be a part of ameliorating those deficits that have been incurred by people of color at our hand. Why black wealth is 1/10 what white wealth is. Why black life expectancy is years lower than white life expectancy. I want to fix those things. I want to be a part of the solution. That's what white people need to start doing, is recognize the humanity in all of us and work to make this a better place for all of us. And that begins by recognizing and being honest about our shared history. All right, checking back in on the stock market. Just, 10 minutes since I last checked, and now it's down 900 points. What was that little blip there? We were up for 500 for a bit. One of the billionaires must have cashed in somehow. But yeah, we're back down, sinking like a stone, 900 below open. Now, continuing with the show today, I wanted to talk a little bit about our concentration camps down there in El Salvador, where we know we have sent innocent people. We know that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been admitted by the government to be someone they should not have deported. Oops, we made a mistake. It was an administrative error. And this guy was actually not even someone that wasn't supposed to be deported. He was ordered not to be deported. He was an asylum seeker, and it was determined that if he went back to El Salvador, he would be tortured or killed by the gangs that are after him. And good luck to him in that prison right now, because those gangs are active there. We also heard the story of the gay hairdresser who was there, who shouldn't be there, and the guy with the Real Madrid tattoo, and the guy with the autism awareness tattoo, these innocent people that should not be there. Well, CNN did an investigation on this, found out the identities of a lot of these people, and discovered that 75% of the people that we have sent to our concentration camp have no criminal record at all. No criminal record at all. They're Venezuelan. they've got some tattoos. That's it. And then of the remaining quarter who do have criminal records, 22% of them, so about a fourth of the fourth, their criminal record is minor, like, traffic violations, disturbing the peace, whatever. So we often say in our criminal justice system, it's better that 1,000 guilty men go free than one innocent man be imprisoned. Well, now we've got hundreds of innocent people imprisoned in this concentration camp. And lest I lose the point, neither should the criminals be in that concentration camp. We have foregone due process on all of these people. None of them should be down there in El Salvador. And for our government to just throw up its hands and say, oops, well, we can't bring Abrego Garcia back because, well, gee, now he's in El Salvador's custody. And gosh, the great and powerful El Salvador, how could we ever tell them what to do? The judge in the case has ordered the United States to return Mr. Abrego Garcia. The government continues to drag its feet, continuing this constitutional crisis of refusing to obey the orders of courts. I saw another report of ICE rounding up kids from an elementary school. This is what we've become, folks. Our Gestapo, guns drawn, with battle armor and helmets worn, storming into our elementary schools to make sure that we rid ourselves of the menace of brown-skinned third graders. Yeah, that's what's been causing all the problems in our country, brown-skinned third graders. I could care less about your 401k. Really, I don't give a shit. I'm happy for you that you have a job and that you put together for retirement. But I would flush away the entire stock market to bring these people back. Because, folks, this could happen to us. The minute they say the government has the right to declare someone an enemy without any due process, without seeing a judge, without going before a court, the government on its word alone says you're a bad guy, can pick you up and ship you off to El Salvador, to a torture prison, and you've got no lawyer, you've got no due process rights to get out. They could do it to any of us. Don't think being white and delightsome like me is going to save your ass. Who knows? I've probably got NSA looking through my social media as we speak. And if the markets continue to tumble and people's retirement savings are flushed away and you have the streets filled with angry 50 and 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds, the people who vote. And as those midterms loom large on the horizon, with Republican Congress critters terrified of their own shadow, unafraid to break ranks with the MAGA destruction lest they be primaried, if the Democrats can't take back the House after this, it's time to just close up shop, call it a good run, shut this country down. And as we continue these shenanigans at our border, we're seeing more and more reports of athletes and tourists and government officials trying to cross our border, being detained, held in holding cells for hours and hours and hours, given the runaround over their passport or their visa. It makes you wonder, how in the hell are we ever going to host Soccer's World Cup in 2026? Soccer's World Cup is being held not just in the United States of America, but North America. There's going to be matches in Canada and Mexico as well. So how in the world are we going to get all of these international teams into and out of the United States and crossing the border with Canada and crossing the border with Mexico? Because, some of these athletes have brown skin, and some of them have tattoos as well. How's that going to work? What country is going to want to try to send their soccer team over to the United States with the possibility that some of them or all of them might end up in an El Salvadorian torture gulag? What team's going to want to send their athletes here? And then also consider the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. We'll have 4 whole years of this Trumpian nonsense. What country's going to want to send their athletes to Los Angeles? At that point, it may not even be the fear of being deported. It might be like the 1980 Olympics, when the United States boycotted the Soviet Union and just didn't send anybody at all. How many countries are going to jump aboard the boycott of the 2028 Olympics? How many countries in the free world are going to make a stand against the United States sliding further into fascism? What an amazing Olympics it'll be. We'll have the sprinters from Russia and North Korea and Iran and Saudi Arabia. What an amazing Olympics it'll be. It's going to destroy our reputation in the world. These next 4 years, I don't know how we recover from them in my lifetime. I've said it before. I can understand the world looking at us for electing Trump the first time. Okay, yeah. You got fooled by the populist. Happens to the best of us. But for it to happen the second time, to have elected Trump the second time, I don't see how the world ever trusts us again. Not without a severe reckoning here. Not without a severe reorganization of our constitutional order, a better application of checks and balances. I don't know how we get out of this. I don't know how we get those prisoners out of El Salvador. But I know that it starts with us. I know that it starts with us calling our representatives, marching in the streets, demanding a change. Wanted to talk a little bit about the issue of trans people in sports. This is something the Trump administration has focused on with their Protect Women and Girls in Sports Act. They're trying to shape it so that Title IX, the federal law that guarantees equity in men's and women's sports, can be used to prevent transgender women from competing in women's sports. And it's a complex issue. And I admit that I don't have all the answers on this, and I've been ignorant on this issue in the past. And I'm trying to work my way through it and learn about it. There are things about the transgender sports issue that do give some people pause. It's a little concerning when you see athletes that had been competing on the male side of sports and not doing very well, who then transition and compete on the women's side and do very well, sometimes winning their sports. And I can understand why this has some people feeling like it's unfair, feeling like there's an unfair advantage conferred by male puberty, that male bodies are different than female bodies. This is a complex issue. And because it's a complex issue, that's why I want to leave it to sports scientists and biologists and the sporting venues and organizations themselves. This is not a place for the federal government to be jumping in and making broad decisions. Every sport is different. There's some sports I don't even understand why they're sexually segregated. Why are we sexually segregating darts? What is it about being male or female that prevents you from throwing a dart? So there are some sports I don't even understand why they're sex segregated. Others I understand why they are, right? You got to have sex segregated boxing. Men are just much more powerful with larger bone structure and all sorts of advantages. So that's where it becomes concerning to people, because it seems like we set up sex segregation in sports for a reason, that the male bodies outperform the female bodies. So that's why it's concerning to people when you have someone who has transitioned, who has a male body, competing in the gender with which their mind is. I can see why that's confusing and upsetting to people. And I see why this has become the wedge issue for the right. Because there's not much argument to be made whether or not the trans person can be a good secretary, or doctor, or teacher, or lawyer, or whatever else, soldier. But the sports issue, because of the sex segregation and because of these federal laws that recognize that sex segregation, make it a difficult topic. And I'm continuing to learn on this, and I'm continuing to build my arguments on this because I want to be on the right side of history. I do recognize that trans people are discriminated against. They've got it tough in life. And why should they be discriminated against from having any of the opportunities anyone else has? On the other hand, Stevie Wonder doesn't get to be a pilot. Peter Dinklage doesn't get to be an NBA center. There are some things we can't do because of the limitations of our bodies. So like I said, I'm a little squishy on this topic. I can understand where both sides are coming from. But what I know for sure is this is not being argued in good faith from the right. Anytime someone from the right wants to go off and talk about women's sports and how the transgenders are affecting women's sports, they should be required to name the current WNBA champion. If you can tell me who the current WNBA champion is, I'll continue speaking with you. Right? Because they don't care about women's sports. This is a wedge issue for them. This is another one of their culture wars. They could give a crap. So I'm going to continue researching this. I'm going to continue speaking with people on the issue. I think this can be worked out on a sport by sport basis, an organization by organization basis. I think there might be a different consideration for someone who is transgender, who has been on puberty blocker since they were a kid, versus someone who transitioned when they were in their late 30s and is just taking hormone replacement. I don't know all the science. I don't know exactly what's fair. It does seem to me a little like when we talk about transgender inclusion in sports, we're talking about it like it's a performance decreasing drug, like anti-steroids, right? How far do you have to bring a male body down in performance before it's fair to compete with a female body? These are tough questions. I don't have the answers yet. I just know my instinct, and my instinct is to protect the underdog, to fight for the little guy, to stand up against bullies. And all of that is what leads me to wanting to support transgender people and their access to sports. But I got to have better arguments than that. It can't just be because I like these people better or I feel bad for these people. I need to have the strong arguments as to why it's fair or why sex segregation isn't the issue and instead it's inclusion. That's kind of where I've been leaning lately, is that we didn't create sex segregated sports based on these are men competing, these are women competing. We created sex segregated sports because the women couldn't compete in the men's side. And neither can transgender women compete on the men's side because they have degraded their performance through the hormone replacement therapies and such. So if we argue from the perspective of inclusion, then it's more like the men's category is the open category and the women's category is the inclusive category in which women and transgender women can compete. Because after all, men's sports aren't sex segregated, only women's are. I'll say that again. Men's sports aren't sex segregated, only women's are. There's no rule that stops any woman from joining the NFL or the NBA or Major League Soccer or Major League Baseball or the National Hockey League. And some women have made inroads into a few of those sports. There's women who have played hockey, goalie. There's women who've been kickers in football. So only women's sports sex segregated. Men's sports an open category. Anybody can compete in it. If we start thinking of sports that way, open versus inclusive, maybe that's the way we get through. Stop calling it men's basketball, women's basketball. Call it open basketball and inclusive basketball. And then we don't have to worry about anybody being offended about being in the sport of the wrong gender. But I give you this long intro to get to this clip because no matter how bad I am on this issue, and I'll admit, like I've told people, I'm a recovering transphobe. I'm trying hard, trying to learn. I'm an old white guy. Give me some time. But I know I'm better on this issue than idiot senator football coach Tommy Tuberville.
Why don't you give me a chance? That's exactly what's going to happen. Jackie, we have entire men's teams across this country now that are turning trans.
Yeah.
Women's teams, they're turning trans. And that's going to be a situation where it's going to pick up speed because these woke globalists are pushing these kids to say, if you can't compete in men's sports, let's just transition and say you're a woman and participate in women's sports. It is dead wrong, and we've got to stand up against it. But the Democrats, they're all in.
The woke globalists. The woke globalists. You know, globalist is their word for Jews, by the way. If you don't know, when they say globalists, they mean Jews. The woke globalists are telling the boys if they can't compete, just transition and compete as a girl. Yeah, that's what they're saying. That's what we're saying. We've been going to all of the track meets and rounding up everybody that finished 4th place and below. Say, fellas, want to be a girl? Really? Tommy, really? Entire teams are turning trans? Name one. Name one entirely trans team. In fact, the participation rate of transgender athletes in sport is so low that if you rounded all of them up, you might make one team. Nationally, there'd be one team, and it would be like a sprinter and a basketball player and a pole vaulter. Like, it wouldn't even be one sport team. Oh my God. Tommy Tuberville, you win Idiot of the Week. All right, folks, time for our Boycott Idaho segment, the segment where we explain all the reasons why you should avoid the handmade state. Boycott Idaho, and in particular, its most popular product, the Idaho potato. No red state is more singularly associated with one product than Idaho and the potato. So boycott the potato today, switch to onion rings instead of fries, get yourself tortilla chips instead of potato chips. Hell, try yourself a salad rather than that loaded baked potato. Your waistline will thank you, and I will as well. And remember, when you boycott Idaho, you do the most damage to a red state with doing the least damage to black people, since so few of them live there. Anyway, for today's Boycott Idaho segment, I want to tell you about Idaho and the death penalty. Idaho is one of many states that has a death penalty, and for the record, I am 100% in favor of the death penalty in any system of justice that is 100% accurate. But since none of them are, and innocent people get executed, I am 100% against the death penalty. As a death penalty state, Idaho has a great deal of difficulty finding the lethal injection drugs that it wants. There is a 2022 law they passed in Idaho that keeps secret the suppliers of lethal injection drugs for the state. Even so, there's still a nationwide shortage of these drugs because the makers of these drugs don't want their product involved in executions. There's an enormous media focus on such cases. And nobody wants to be known as the company that makes execution drugs, especially because those drugs often have other legitimate non-execution medical uses. There's also the chance that you botch an execution, and then there's a bunch of lawsuits, and there's a bunch more media coverage, and then there's some financial liability for some of those companies. This is why death penalty throughout the United States has kind of been on hold because they can't get the death penalty drugs. Well, Idaho's not going to stand by and just let people not get murdered for their terrible, heinous crimes. So in 2023, Idaho legalized the use of firing squads for executions. Yeah, firing squads. But only for cases where they can't get the supply of lethal injection drugs. And other states have made similar laws. They've revived the use of the electric chair. They've experimented with fentanyl overdosing. They've even used nitrogen gas to suffocate people to death. My God. Why all the restraint? Why not just tie the prisoner to a chair with a pound of TNT under it and blow him up? Or just revive the hangman's gallows, or bring back tying them to the stake and burning them alive. You know, good old American traditions. Well, later in 2023 in Idaho, the prison officials tried to make up for their lack of lethal injection drugs. In this case, we're talking about a drug called pentobarbital. And in a story that was just released on, what's the website? NBC News came up with this. NBC News reports that Idaho prison officials got a hold of some pentobarbital by meeting some anonymous dealers in an unmarked van for a drug deal at a barren rural crossroads miles outside the prison. Now, the officials won't identify who the people were at the two drug deals, or even if it was the same people at both drug deals. They won't even identify which vehicle or vehicles they used because of that 2022 law I told you about that keeps all that stuff secret. So we've got prison officials going down to the crossroads to meet an unmarked van with some unknown people to pick up some drugs. How many people are sitting in that prison who did the same goddamn thing? Met somebody at a crossroads to pick up some drugs. Unbelievable. The court documents that were revealed by NBC News show that the prison officials believe that the pentobarbital they got probably were manufactured by an FDA-approved company. Probably. Because they were still in an original type manufacturer's box. Oh, okay. So now the drug dealers at the crossroads in the desert are dealing official FDA-approved drugs that they swiped from somewhere? What's going on here? The records show the state has purchased $300,000 worth of pentobarbital on the roadside. In cash, I suppose. The two U.S. manufacturers have demanded that Idaho never use their drugs for executions. So there's only two manufacturers in the United States that even make this pentobarbital. One of the manufacturers says, that wasn't us. That's not our pentobarbital. We're not letting people take it out in vans out in the country and deal it surreptitiously to prison officials. That's not us. The other company is refusing comment. So you can draw your own conclusions as to where that pentobarbital may have came from. The supply of pentobarbital was meant in part for the execution of Thomas Creech. Thomas Creech is a death row inmate who's been there since I was in high school. He'd been sitting on death row for 40 years now. They tried killing him in February of 2024, but they couldn't get the IV line properly set up, and the execution was halted. Since then, since February, all that pentobarbital has expired. $300,000 bought in roadside anonymous drug deals, and now it's all worthless. Can't be used for anything. And the fact that Thomas Creech has been on death row for 40 years once again illustrates why the death penalty is unnecessary. It costs more. It literally costs more to keep someone on death row than to keep them life in prison because of all the appeals and the court cases and such. This need for a death penalty in this country is really, it's a religious right. It's a religious right of vengeance. All the studies show the death penalty does not deter any more crime, doesn't stop people from committing the heinous crimes that they commit. There's no deterrence effect. All it does is satisfy bloodlust in this country. And, you know, from my perspective, I also think it's too good for them. When you get one of these heinous, evil people like Thomas Creech, who literally evil dude, he was a Hell's Angels guy, committed tons of murders, serial killer type, bad guy. But to me, killing's too good for them. Like, you do all this heinous, evil, terrible shit. Probably because you get off on it, right? Go and murder and kill and rape and do this terrible, heinous, evil shit because you get off on it. And then we kill you? Then it's just over? Why not make that evil, heinous person serve out the rest of their miserable lives? Bored, incarcerated, institutionalized, wearing the same prison jumpsuit day after day after day, just marking time till the Grim Reaper comes for you. Having to fall asleep every night to the screams in your memory of the people that you harmed. Killing's too good for them. It lets them off the hook. It gets them out of that whole next 40, 50 years of worthless, incarcerated life that they could suffer through. Checking back in on the stock market, 8:15 Pacific time as I record the podcast, and it looks like that bump is over. We're back down to, let's see, 800 points under. Oh, we're down 1,000 points now. And at one point early in the morning, we did drop below the 52-week low. We got as low as 36,611, trading right now at about 37,350. Good luck, traders. Earlier, I talked about the hands-off protests and how successful they were, and how there had to have been a whole bunch of pissed-off Trump voters out there. And we're hearing a lot of, well, this isn't what I voted for. I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for my 401k to be tanked. I didn't vote for my retirement fund to be wiped out in 3 days. That's not what I voted for. Well, I think all these people should be asked, well, what did you vote for? What did you vote for? Was it the racism? You just thought he'd be racist to the people you didn't like, but now he's hurting you? Because once again, we've found ourselves with a terrible case of conservative empathy. It happened to me. It didn't bother you before when we had all the anti-Semitism? That wasn't a reason to vote against him. When he lied about having bone spurs so he could avoid the draft, being a draft dodger, that didn't stop you from voting for him. The fact that he bankrupted casinos didn't give you any clue as to what might happen to your retirement savings. That he lusts after his daughter. That he actually has lusted in public after his own daughter. That didn't throw you any. You were still fine with voting for him then. That he's Epstein's best buddy. That he's palled around. Like, the only time you've ever seen Donald Trump having a good time, smiling and laughing, are those videos with Epstein. That didn't give you pause as to voting for this guy. The fact that he was convicted of 34 felonies for fraud, to try to cover up the fact that he was sleeping with a woman that he was cheating on his girlfriend with, that he was cheating on his wife with. People forget that part of the story when we talk about Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels was him cheating on Karen McDougal, and Karen McDougal was him cheating on Melania Trump. There's a through line of double cheating going on there. At the time when Melania was still nursing young Barron, who had just been born. That didn't give you reason to think, I had a vote for the black lady. That didn't stop you. His grift, the grifting, the Trump coin, the Trump sneakers, the Trump Bible with his name on it. You evangelical Christians, he was signing Bibles. That didn't give you pause. That wasn't a problem. He drew a hurricane path with a Sharpie in an official press conference to try to fool you all about where a hurricane was going. And you thought, yeah, let's give this guy another term. That wasn't a problem for you. He was impeached twice. The only president in our history impeached twice. Once for trying to blackmail one of our allies into manufacturing political dirt against his opponent, and the second time for inciting an insurrection at the Capitol for the first time in American history to stop the peaceful transfer of power. You were cool with that, MAGA. That was no problem for you. That he would corrupt our justice system. He'd have Eileen Cannon delaying the trial for the documents at Mar-a-Lago, where he had our secrets piled to the ceiling in his shitter. That didn't bother you any. The obstruction of justice that he did to thwart the Mueller report with his own handpicked Bill Barr rewriting what the Mueller report actually said to fool us all, that didn't give you pause. You were still cool with Trump at that point. The fact that the KKK supports him, that the KKK, that's their guy, didn't make you think, maybe I ought not be on the same side as the KKK. That was no problem for you, MAGA. That he'd been found liable for fraud and defamation. That he has been adjudicated of raping E. Jean Carroll, $5 million penalty on that, and then afterward twice defaming her, saying it was all fake, after it had already been adjudicated in a court of law. You're all cool with that, MAGA. I remember you saying, oh, she's making it all up. I remember you defending all of the women, the 26 so far that have brought up cases against him or made accusations against him, and you waved it all away. Oh, because he's such a handsome playboy billionaire. They're all just gold diggers. That wasn't a problem for you, MAGA. That he is multiply indicted. 4 different indictments, only one of which was seen through to fruition because, again, of the justice corrupting that stopped the other 3 cases from moving forward. That wasn't a problem for you. That he wants to extort NATO, and now appears that he wants to break it up or leave it. Our allies, the Pax Americana, the world order that has been set since World War II, defended by the greatest military alliance in world history, NATO, and he wants to trash that. You were cool with that, weren't you, Republicans? You had no problem with that part. That he's oligarch favoring, that he's giving trillion-dollar tax cuts. He did it before, and he's going to do it again, and he's doing so by raiding our Social Security and Medicaid. You had no problem with that, as he repeatedly said that on the campaign trail, that he's going to give massive tax cuts again. That was fine. That was what you were voting for. You were cool with that. That he favors Vladimir Putin. That the only world leader he will not criticize is Vladimir Putin. That he is so obviously a Russian asset since the mid-1980s even. We've got reports that Agent Krasnov, or Asset Krasnov, was being recruited as soon as 1987. You were all fine with that, MAGA. His racism, oh, that's what you loved about him, right? You loved his racism. The people from shithole countries, the low IQ congresswomen. You loved all that racism. You had no problem with that. The sexual assaults, we've talked about this, the sexual assaults. His traitorous actions against this country. His saluting of a North Korean general, for God's sake. His betrayal of Ukraine, trying to extort Ukraine, dressing down Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office for not wearing a suit and saying thank you enough. His dishonor of veterans. My God, you MAGA people, you support the troops people. God, guns, and guts kept America free. But, he can go off and talk about veterans being suckers and losers. He can refuse to meet the fallen soldiers who come back from Lithuania. He can refuse to be seen with vets with amputations because it makes them look bad. He can refuse to visit the graves of our soldiers in France because it's raining that day and might mess up his hair. You were all fine with that, MAGA. His white supremacy, his naked white supremacy. Don't got a problem with that. His xenophobia, his Muslim bans, his now the bans on steroids, some 40 odd countries now, where just being from that country, you can't get in. His pedophilia, the young girl peeping, when he bragged about owning the Miss Teen USA pageant and being able to sneak backstage while they're all undressed. You'd let this guy around your daughters? You'd let this guy around your elementary schools? You had no problem with that. And the fact that he empowers zealots, that he gives the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and the evangelicals all the support they could want, you didn't have a problem with that. When we look at Donald Trump from A to Z, you supported everything about that, except now your 401k's in the shitter and you got some problems. Well, what was the phrase you guys came up with? What was it? Oh yeah, fuck your feelings. There's been discussion at these rallies, at the hands-off protests about, these MAGAs who are going to be disillusioned. Do we welcome them into the resistance? Do we want them to be a part of our rallies and our marches? Sure. Show up with your sign. Honk in the crowd if you want to. Stand amongst us to show that we want Donald Trump out of here. But don't think for a second that any of us have forgotten what you supported about Donald Trump, and that you only came around when it affected you personally.
And it goes down smooth.
All right, folks, that's all the time we've got for the podcast today. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by freestockmusic.com and VTEMO courtesy of freetouse.com/music. Oh, and one quick post-credit scene here for you regarding the hands-off protests. Amongst the signs there were a whole lot of signs featuring penguins because of Trump issuing a 10% tariff against the Heard McDonald Islands that are only inhabited by penguins. And one commenter on my social media feed made a really good point. Deidre Asenza says, "Look, I feel like we could not have landed on a better mascot for the resistance if we tried. Penguins are black and white. They mate for life and are often gay. They deal with ice better than anyone. They're well known to be excellent dancers. Penguins are the heroes we need." I agree, Deidre. Let's make the penguin the symbol of the resistance. It also alliterates well with penguin people power. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Last check-in on the stock market, 8:30 Pacific Time, down 1,000 points. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of each other.
We love the earth. So me. You